Amen.
Thank you. All right, members, welcome. Just for the records, member, we are resuming the sittings of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. We're doing so on a carry-on motion from the House from February. The substantive issue that we have today has to do with a motion moved by the Minister of Finance in Parliament for us to look at the third supplementary estimates of expenditure for the year ending March 31st, 2019, which were laid on the 20th day of March, 2019. So it is our intention today to look at these. My understanding is that there are not a lot of changes, but we will examine those, and then it is the intention to prepare the report this morning and have it tabled at 2 o'clock in Parliament for the House to proceed with the supplementary budget. So time is somewhat of the essence today. So we're going to try and move as quickly as possible. Before I get into that, there are two matters of housekeeping. Well, three matters that I would like to suggest to members. Number one, we would have to today determine an agenda moving forward and a timetable just for the first meetings. I don't suggest that we do the entire agenda, but we could certainly pick the first 2 or 3 dates, and then at a meeting where we have more members, we can then determine the full timetable that we'd like to proceed on. But it is my intention to not have a meeting next week. I understand from the clerk that on the 10th there is a meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Criminal Justice, which is going to be a meeting, so the chambers are not available. I'm suggesting the 17th, which is the Wednesday before Good Friday, that we proceed and that we can determine, certainly in the early part, we'd meet on the 17th and the 24th, and by that time we can determine the rest of the agenda. So I'm going to propose that to members. Before I... members have been asked to indicate that we have with us some visitors. We have some visitors from Belle Isle High School who are here, and I've been indicated. And secondly, from the University of the West Indies Faculty of Law. So we'd like to welcome them to our sitting today. All right, members. Oh. Yes. All right. So apologies for. Do we have any other apologies? All right. No other apologies. All right. Yes. Members, there are two issues that I would like to raise. The first issue has to do with a letter that we have received here at the committee. The letter comes from the Jamaica Society for Industrial Security, and it is signed by the president of the society. The letter is addressed to the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. And I'd like to just read out the letter so that members... Pardon, use the mic, please. Yes, that letter.
I'm sorry, but this is addressed to the Honorable Minister.
No, that was, I think that's a copy. The same letter, we have a letter here, addressed to the committee. I think that was part of the package, but it's the same letter, so I just wanted members to have something in front of them. But this letter is addressed to the chairman of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. One was also sent to the clerk. The letter says, "Dear Sir, re government contracts non-compliant with the national minimum wage. It is with great concern that I wish to bring to your attention the failure of various government agencies to ensure that security companies who are awarded contracts are compliant with the national minimum wage for security officers. It is of even greater concern that despite furnishing the pertinent information to the Ministry of Labor, there has been no intervention, much less an acknowledgement. I have attached a copy of my letter to the Minister of Labor dated December 12, 2018, along with its attachments. In examining the provided pay slips, it is noticeable in the case of, and they've named a company, that the laundry allowance paid at a rate of $44 per hour should be paid for every hour worked, but is capped at 80 hours per fortnight. This means that the officers are being short paid on average $2,816 per fortnight, or $73,216 per annum. This action has cheated the guards out of a significant sum of money, but has also given the offending company significant pricing advantage in a very competitive market. In the case of, and the property's name, absolutely no laundry allowance is being paid. Hence, the security officers are treated of $5,280 per fortnight, or $137,280 per annum. This situation is untenable, and the government is not exercising proper analysis of rates and ensuring compliance is a clear dereliction of responsibility. Your investigation of these matters is requested." They have also sent with it copies of pay slips of the various companies. Members, it is my understanding that the government is the largest employer of security guards, and this is a large market, and we want to ensure that the companies that are working for the government are compliant and that these security guards are being protected under the law as they should. My suggestion, members, would be that we indicate, I intend to write to the minister or the Ministry of Labor indicating that if this information is correct, of course, it's coming from Jamaican Society of Industrial Security, they must indicate to us if the analysis is correct. And secondly, if so, I think it is incumbent on us to ensure that government is compliant in terms of its hiring practices and the contracts it has with the security guards, and must ensure that the security guards are appropriately paid in this matter. So I put this before the committee and ask members for their guidance. Member Jackson.
With your permission, Chair, I think we have the benefit of the Ministry of Finance with us here this morning. My recollection from some time ago that many contractors of other services to the government, whether it be security, laundry, janitorial services in the hospitals, and so on, had made the complaint about the rates being changed for minimum wage and the rates at which the contracts are entered into in government does not reflect the adjustment for the changes made during the life of the contract. And so they would, if they were to pay the specified rates, it would make them non-viable because the adjustment by the ministry doesn't take place. The long and short of it is, and why I think it belongs here, is the fact that the budgetary provision by the government in whatever ministries, I believe, ought to ensure that they are in compliance with what government regulations are. Otherwise, we would, by budgetary action, be contributing to those breaches. And therefore, if not now, I don't expect the Ministry of Finance probably this morning can respond, but it's something that we would also want to get their input in terms of how do they treat or seek to treat with these substantial budgetary allocation for contract services for entities that are or may be in breach of the labor laws.
Member Stewart.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, this has been an ongoing issue for quite a while now, and it would be a real indictment on the Ministry of Labor and the government by extension if this were to continue. And the matter needs to be addressed with alacrity, I may say, because many of these poor security guards as part of the labor force have been impacted in a negative way. And the letter that you read just now about the short payment is really food for thought at this time, and it needs to be looked at and to be addressed in a very serious and critical manner. And I'm happy that the Ministry of Finance, they are here, and they will be able to shed some light as to what provisions have been made in this year's budget to alleviate the situation for these workers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I think that it is in order that the letter has been sent directly to the committee. We have read, and my opinion is that it be sent, as you rightly said, to the ministry for the ministry to act upon, so that everybody will be in fair order.
Yes. Member Campbell.
Chairman, perhaps the letter which you read has gone a little further than the one I have before me. And perhaps we ought to craft something a little wider so that we could properly launch an investigation into the industrial relations practices of the particular industry. And we could subpoena the principals of the two offending entities to find out what if they are
speaking the mic from the hand side.
If to find out if they're in compliance with it. But I think it's far too narrow, and we do not know if there is some prejudice being or some malice, if I may put it that way, being directed at. So let us
absolutely
craft it and then to invite the principals of these two entities to find out if they're in compliance. And if they're not in compliance, then we take it one step further.
Well, I think we're all in agreement. The first thing I would say is that it seems amazing to me when I just read the letter to hear that it could be possible that over $70,000 a year could be withheld from a security guard's pay is totally inappropriate as far as I'm concerned. Now, the important point for us is that we in Parliament and government cannot be making laws to protect the workers, and then we are complicit in our contractual arrangements with hiring security guards if they are in fact in breach of these laws that we have created. So what we're going to do, members, I will instruct the clerk, we will write to the Ministry of Labor to indicate that we would like for them to analyze this so that we can get a report on this, and analyze the situation and indicate if this is indeed correct. for them to do an analysis of all the security guards that are hired by government at this point in time for us to determine whether these breaches occur, and if so, what plans the Ministry of Labor would advise be taken with regards to proceeding. I would ask the clerk to do so, and we could ask that this report be sent to us in 2 weeks. I don't think it should take much longer than that. And that we would ask what we can do is, when it's circulated in 2 weeks' time to members, we can determine if at the first meeting we have on the 17th, we could at least look at it or determine how we will proceed with that on the 17th. Maybe we can look at that as a specific item. Do we have agreement on that, members?
Just a little modification, Chair. Just for expediting the matter. You indicate 2 weeks for the report. I believe we could tentatively schedule it for then pending the receipt
for the
of
17th.
Because then you have to give another
Absolutely.
notice period again for them to come.
All right, and what we would at that point do, when the report comes back to members, as indicated by Member Campbell, we can determine whether or not we are satisfied. I think that it's probably going to need Ministry of Labor and Ministry of Finance, because there may be budgetary implications to this. And certainly we could take the advice of who else we may have to invite from the companies involved. All right? Members, the second item that I just want to raise is something that has given me, as chairman of this committee, a little disquiet over the last week. A year ago, we had asked the Ministry of Finance to furnish us with a list of consultants. And we had gotten that list of consultants. And it occurred to me that when I'm looking in the media now, I'm hearing of consultants that may have been hired, and I use the term may, been hired to the Ministry of Education. The report we got initially had one consultant, which was Sharon Hay Webster. It then elaborated. The minister had sent back and said there were 2 other consultants and named those 2 other consultants. So there were 3 consultants in the ministry. I've subsequently heard other names called, and it gives me a bit of disquiet, because the question is, we are asking those questions so that we get information that helps us in our deliberations. The reason for it is to see which consultants, and in overseeing the government and how government operates and the funding, to see how many consultants were there. Now, it's one of 2 things. One, maybe it fell through the cracks because maybe some of these consultants, or the consultant, if it is so, may have been hired after, I do not know. Or it may be that we are only getting persons who are directly contracted under the auspices of the minister. However, there may be other consultants all over the place, hired in different capacities that we do not know about. And for us as members, if we're asking the question, it's because we want a specific answer. And so I just say to the members that I think that what we need to do now is to indicate that we want a fresh list of the consultants, but that it includes all, because obviously somewhere along the line we're missing some, or we may be missing. So we're not getting the picture that we anticipated getting in the first place. And secondly, I think that given all that has taken, and I know there are issues that are being looked at in the Ministry of Education with law enforcement agencies, but I do believe with all the things that are happening that we as a committee it is our duty, our responsibility to indicate that we should see the Ministry of Education to determine whether or not there are systemic inefficiencies and faults in their systems, and that we should invite them to appear before us. So the first point I make is that I believe that we should again submit to Ministry of Finance to give us a full list of consultants, and to really give us all the consultants and tell us if it is so that some of the names we hear as consultants have fallen through the cracks, why is it those names were not provided to us in the first place? And secondly, to members, I'm saying that early in our schedule, I think we must invite the Ministry of Education. So I put that to the members.
A little comment here, Chairman. I think you have put it mildly about not being told. As you said in your opening remarks, and I recall very clearly, we got only one initially, and then two, so there were little drips. To deny the information to the committees, to deny the information to the public. As I've oftentimes said, these committees are not our private domain. It is a public forum for public information at the very least, and appreciation of what we do in government. And secondly, Chairman, in the communication to the Ministry of Education, it must be emphasized that this bit of information is not just for the ministry central, but all the entities that falls under the jurisdiction of the ministry.
And just a follow-up to support Member Jackson's point, that I believe that the consultants who are employed by government, it's a policy, and they normally have to be approved by cabinet. Ms. I'm corrected, Mrs. Morrison, if you could back me up there, and that the list should always be made public. If there are additions after they would have been sent to us or to other committees, I believe that the addition should also be made known as quickly as possible. I don't know if there is a diversion from that. I don't know if Ms. Morrison could speak to it.
Yes.
I'm not aware of a requirement for cabinet approval, and I'm also not aware that there was a request for any additions to the consultants to be submitted.
Yeah, I think Ms. Morris is correct. The appointment of consultants is not a cabinet appointment, but for that very reason, in holding governments and holding them responsible, it is our duty to seek this information. So, if any other members, if no other members have any comments on this, I would request the clerk, we will ask the Ministry of Finance to give us a fulsome list of the consultants being had. They can do it by category, because so that we can get an idea of what the real picture is. Because as Member Jackson said, we're obviously missing something somewhere, you know. And secondly, members, it is we are going to look at this issue with Ministry of Labor. We normally take Ministry of Finance in the early part, but I think that it's important for us to send out from now, asking the Ministry of Education to give us the normal reports so that we can fit them into the scheduling either in the second or third meeting of our committee. Do we have agreement on that, members? Thank you.
Mr. as you're dealing with other matters, we are at the end of coming to the end of the 2018-2019 financial year. And there was some matter in the Ministry of Education that I would also like to get a bit of clarity on, because I don't recall it having been fully ventilated the last time. The Jamaica, what's the proper acronym for lifetime learning? What's the proper? Right. JFLL, yes. Right. I recall that they were in the process of constructing a building for themselves. And I'm aware, I haven't heard anything further about the intent of that construction, of that building. I'm aware that there were some funds being held and set aside for that purpose. I would like, as we communicate with the Ministry of Education, to give an update on it. I know that there was some contribution from the Chinese embassy in that regard, and I would also like to know just what is the status of that arrangement. And secondly, I also want to get an idea of the contracting out of training services under the CAP program by the ministry. They had engaged a private entity, I think my recollection is correct, is Manpower and Maintenance Services, to do training, and some training had taken place. And persons were trained, but they were not, how should I say, the formal consummation of the exercise, though trained, was not done. But I gather that there is a contracting arrangement between HART and with HART to do the same contracting services that was already done by this private entity. So I would just put in a nutshell, I would like to get some clarity on what is the arrangement with the ministry for the training of janitors, cleaners, vis-a-vis the private contractor and those engaged by HART.
I was just thinking that it may be prudent also for us to get HART coming in, because HART is now on a different entity, having been shifted from education to the Office of the Prime Minister. And the Jamaica Lifelong Learning has also been merged with HART. So they
we would require both.
Certainly.
We'd require both with education. And what I would say, members, as we had indicated before, some of these are very direct questions. And if members feel that there are questions that certainly that affect them generally, you can ask the clerk for those, and what she will do is circulate the questions amongst members and send them, because we are trying to get the transparency and openness. But for the most part, we'll get the general report and we'll include HART and JFLL with it. All right, members, can we, if there's nothing else here, and we are going to start on the 17th, and we will hopefully see what we have from the Ministry of Labour. What I'll do is write members before that, probably by next week, and give an update of how we can proceed. I'll speak to the clerk about the availability of chamber, and we'll start our process. All right, so members, today we're here to take the third supplementary. I want to welcome the team from the Ministry of Finance. I don't know why Mr. Sweeney has decided that he's taking himself so far away. He's so far away, he's made himself noticeable. You know, you'd have merged more into the crowd. But welcome everybody. And PS or FS Morrison, what I'm going to do is turn over to you. You can introduce your team, and then I would ask you to take us through the supplementary estimates, which I think is just, members, I think I've been, and just looking at it, is a tidying up, as we only have what, how many days? 8 days left? Huh? What? So anything you do here is just to kind of carry us to Friday, so it's quick. All right, so with that, Yes, and his budget is so, important to the overall. It's such a large percentage of the overall budget that we don't want it to stay too far. Yes. Yes. All right. So, Financial Secretary Morrison, please.
Good morning. This morning with me is Mrs. Loris Jarrett, the Deputy Financial Secretary for the Public Expenditure Division, as well as a number of representatives from the Public Expenditure Division and the Economic Management Division. Okay, so we would have provided you with a brief on the third supplementary estimates. I will just run through the main points. The third supplementary estimates that has been tabled indicates a total revised expenditure of $802.563 billion. This is in fact the same figure as the second supplementary estimates because what it reflects is a reallocation of amounts that have been identified that will not be spent. So we have done some reallocations. So the $802.563 billion is comprised of non-debt expenditure of $516.9 and public debt expenditure of $285.7. The third supplementary estimates, it's the adjustments are on both the recurrent and the expenditure sides. On the recurrent expenditure, a total of $2.7 billion is being reallocated. That's 0.6% of the recurrent budget. And this is comprised of $2.1 billion that will be allocated to clear the balance remaining on the streetlight arrears, and $577 million to address arrears to suppliers of goods and services for the tax administration Jamaica. The funds are being reallocated from pensions, where $1.5 billion is being reallocated, and there are a number of reasons for this. This includes the recalculation which had to take place based on the new salary settlements, so they have been delays. There were errors in the calculations by the MDAs in some of the calculations, and this had to be redone. And of course, the wage negotiations that continued for a while would have delayed the finalized processing, hence the reallocations. But we expect to be addressing these pensions early in the next fiscal year. We also have $600 million also from within the Ministry of Finance from various activities that will not complete, largely because of timing issues. So again, we will be addressing those in the new fiscal year. On the capital expenditure side, we have $1.5 billion that is being allocated to go to the contingency fund, contingency for natural disasters. And this will be added to $500 million that was already budgeted to make a total of $2 billion that will go into the contingency fund. The contingency fund is established under Section 13 of the Financial Administration and Audit Act and is held by the Accountant General in the Bank of Jamaica. It requires that the government make budgetary provision for weather-related risk in the estimates of expenditure and to transfer that sum to the contingencies fund. This is actually the first time we will be doing a transfer to the fund. In the past, where we have had issues, disasters, we have directly funded the ministries and departments from the consolidated fund. Okay, contingencies fund. Well, the Appropriation Act indicates that if the minister is satisfied that there is an unforeseen need for expenditure for which no provision or no sufficient provision has been made, by an appropriation law that the funds may be put into the contingencies fund. The minister will be tabling a resolution and ministry paper today in respect of the increase that is being requested for the fund, because there is currently a ceiling of $100 million on what can be transferred to the fund. And that is basically it. So it's really 3 areas that we have reallocations toward in the third supplementary.
All right. Just before I turn it on, let me just get some clarity. I'm just trying to understand. You have 2.1 for streetlights, 1.5 that has gone for natural disasters to the contingency fund, right? And 577 to tax administration. Now, these funds are coming from mostly?
Okay, so that's what I was
You had
indicating.
said pensions.
1.5 from pensions.
And the other?
And there is another 600 million also from within the Ministry of Finance.
Yeah, but there's 2 million for streetlights. 2 billion, sir.
Right, so that would add to the 2.1 that goes to streetlights on the recurrent side.
No, I said, so yeah, you said that some comes from pensions, 1.5, but the rest of it?
The rest is coming from, is under capital and is coming from projects that are not going to utilize the full amount by March 31.
Okay, so the projects that are not going to be able to use it in the next couple of days,
yes,
you move it across to deal with this. So it's really a housekeeping. All right?
Intents and purposes.
And the second point is that it says number 6.6 on the capital. You have the resolution 5. Section 13.1 of the FAA Act places a ceiling of $100 million as the aggregate sum which can be held in the contingencies fund. But it can be moved up by resolution. But you say in 2.1 that the Ministry of Finance has a provision being increased from 500 million to 2 billion. So how much you have in it now? 500 million?
No, we had a 500 million in the budget for provided for the contingencies fund. It was already there, so we're adding 1.5 to that 500.
Yeah, but you did that 500 million without the resolution.
It hasn't been transferred. It hasn't been transferred. It was
so
in
you're
the
going
budget.
to have to do the retroactive. You're going to have to do, your resolution is going to take in the total amount.
No.
Then.
Okay. Yes, it will take into account the 500 that was budgeted.
Okay. Member Jackson and Member Campbell. Is there anybody else? Member Jackson and Campbell.
Just a couple questions for information. The natural disaster infrastructure fund, you are transferring these funds in it now. Have you used any money from this fund during the financial year that is, because we're at the end of the year when you're now making the transfer? Is it that you had incurred those expenses that they're going to cover, or is it they're just making provision of those funds there? And secondly, does it fall under the same strictures where you have to use the allocated funds by the end of the financial year? Guide me on that one.
Okay, it is a provision that we're making. We have not used the funds. It's a provision should there be a disaster at any point in the future. It's when you utilize it, if there's a disaster and you utilize it, it can happen outside of the year. It's just treats it as an advance. It's treated as an advance, no.
Have similar application to the insurance, what's the name of it? The Caribbean Disaster Fund that we were in, because we are no longer subscribing to that.
Yes, we are.
We are.
We are, but
any change of the terms? And we weren't getting anything, though we were contributing.
Okay, so the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, what Jamaica has opted for is at a specific level. It's at a certain level with respect to tropical cyclones, earthquakes, or excess rainfall. If the event that happens does not trigger the level at which we have insured, then we will not have a payout. So we have not had an event at the level at which we are insured. The current policy that is in terms of financing that is being put together will provide for levels of events. So we also currently have an arrangement through the IDB with the IDB that will trigger at a lower level than the Caribbean catastrophe should we have an event, as well as this contingency fund now. So,
okay. Next question. The provision for the public service, the wage settlement. All the wage settlements have been settled now?
There are a few small groups still outstanding. We are at about 97% in terms of settlements. Very small groups that are still outstanding.
Okay. Any ideas? And any idea when those will be completed?
Right. So we are.
Give me an idea. Which are those groups?
Okay. I think there are some small health groups. The major health groups have settled, but I think there are some small groups within the health sector.
The reason, Mr. Chairman, why I push for that one is that, regrettably, we tend to, when I was there, it was a similar thing. The bigger ones, the police, the teachers, the nurses, and so on, we treat them with priority to get the settlement. But the problem, Mr. Chairman, and up to this morning, I had, before coming here, I had the experience. These small groups, their incomes are very low. And the longer you take for the settlement, their situation are worse than some of the bigger ones. And they feel that they just get lost in the process by us government. And it's across administration. It's not a political administration issue, but they are small. I shared with you just this morning, I was speaking with a district constable in one of the important offices of the police services, and the salary that they are being paid, though very, very important, was, to be honest with you, I was a bit embarrassed as part of the public service. But they are not like the rank and file members. They don't have the voice, they don't have the push. And when you hear what they earn and the value of the service that they provide, and the officer that I spoke to felt just helpless. So I raise it here because I would like for those to be settled with some amount of alacrity. Notwithstanding, they make up only 3% of the remaining groups. The last question, more comment. Well, question and a comment. Out of the 2.7, you mentioned PSFS, that projects that are incomplete. I have an ongoing, long-standing issue with incomplete projects at the end of the financial year where monies are reallocated because it's obviously a result of, in most cases, improper or incomplete project planning. Because every time we allocate monies in the budget, we are denying allocation somewhere else, right? And the money is allocated there, nothing happens, and then you have a lot of issues in other areas. So I'd just like to get an idea what the quantum like for those unfinished projects that makes up the 2.7 billion.
Okay, so it's 1.5 that relates to that. 1.5 billion, and it's about 2% of the overall capital budget. So, not saying it's not, sir, but the It's not incomplete. It's just that it's timing issues. So procurement could have contributed to pushing them to a point where they weren't.
Give me an idea of some of those projects that make up this 1.5 billion.
Okay, I think one of them is the needs.
The needs?
Yeah.
Well, that's a worthwhile delay.
JSIP. There's one under JSIP.
Although I see a lot of ads been running for the needs, and I was curious about the expenditure, notwithstanding the delay in execution of the project.
Right, so indication is that it is really procurement that is delaying everything that we're looking at. The other one is the Jamaica Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Program. Again, a procurement delay.
Okay. What was it was to be procured on the needs that make up? What was the services or the goods to be procured?
All right, the needs include software that needed to be procured that has been delayed.
So the bidding process and so forth have been completed?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Essentially.
Are there any road projects?
Road projects? Are there any road projects? Yeah, on a road. No.
All right. Member Campbell and Member Dunn and Member Clark.
FS, could you just look at item 3.1a? You said that there's a 2.1 billion for the streetlight arrears. What I'm interested in finding out is whether or not the audit, which really surrounds this whole issue, has been done, and if we have settled those figures, because it seems to be this recurring decimal that we have dealing with, and I'm never certain as to whether we've reached a point where we can say this is the figure that we're dealing with, because when I was certainly of the impression that when we paid this 7.1 billion that we had cleared the arrears, to now find that there's an additional 2.1 billion is not very comforting. And we were told at the time that an audit was being done and that the set-off would be done if we determined that at the end of this audit, we found that the number of streetlights which we had contracted for were in fact there, and that the provision of the power to them was in place. I'm not certain where we are with that.
Okay, I'm unable to speak to the audit. I'm not sure of the status of the audit. However, with respect to the arrears, we had in fact indicated that at the time, we were not able to pay out the entire thing this year, and there was in fact an amount that would have been reflected in the next fiscal year. It is that amount that we have brought forward, given that we now have the resources that could be directed towards it.
Thank you.
Member Campbell, if I may, I think the point you made is a very valid point. I don't think we have to call them before us, but I think it's what you are seeking. We had been told by the Minister of Finance and local government that by paying off these arrears, that by, I think it was June of this year, all the street lamps that were not working should have been up and working. And there was also a period by which the change over to LED was to have taken place. I think maybe what we could do is just ask the clerk to ask for our understanding where that program is, and just to give it to us, because I think it affects all of us. You know, you're out there speaking to constituents every day, and everywhere you go, somebody tells you that the street lamp in front of them house not working. So it allows us to do that. So if we could just ask the clerk to write to the Ministry of Labor, I think would be the correct. Am I correct, FS? Sorry, local government, my mistake. And ask if they could just give us the schedule and whether they are on schedule, given the fact that we are paying off even more quickly than we anticipated.
Mr. Chairman, it leads to my question that I wanted to ask, just a follow-up.
Well, I don't want to cut. I cut in on Member Campbell, and I don't want him to get angry.
Claiming my time, sir. Claiming my time.
Absolutely. I wouldn't want him to.
Chair, Madam FS, it's the point which was raised earlier by Member Jackson in relation to item, on page 2, the item at the top of the page, which has to do with the allocation of an additional.
To the emergency contingency fund?
Yes. And I too have a concern about that we have in place this fund, and what is the level of trigger that has to be met for us to benefit from that fund? Because how long have we been paying into this fund?
Well, I think it's two different things.
No, the Caribbean.
Oh, yes, that's the point, not the contingency.
Right. So I really want to tie the two things together, because we're setting aside 1.5, but there's a point which we benefit or not, as the case may be. There are these activities, these acts, which have to be in place for us to be able to claim from this Caribbean Disaster Fund which we have in place. And what is the cost to us presently?
No, maybe I'm mistaking it, or Member Campbell. I think that what they're doing is setting up for Jamaica a contingency emergency fund and putting the total of $2 billion in there so that we can utilize. But it doesn't take away from the point you are making that we are still contributing second as well to the Caribbean catastrophe fund.
Yes,
I'm in full agreement with you on that.
What I'd want to do, sir, is to make a determination as to whether what we are doing is in fact good practice. And we're getting value for money. Because would it not be a better situation to take the funds we are contributing to the Caribbean Disaster Fund and set it and put it in this one? And hence the question I asked as to how long we've been making and what is our total contribution to date. Is it not better to assume the state to assume the greater level of risk, given that we have this fund and we can set aside on a yearly, because we have these disasters occurring when, how often, and which the question I would ask thereafter. If we looking at the model which we've been using, and we know that we're likely to have one of these disasters every 10 years, do we, on an annual basis, set aside $500 million and it is likely to take care of the disaster, as opposed to paying into a fund which we, if I understand it
never
correctly,
get a payout.
It's for a long time, and we have never been able to, well, we have never suffered a disaster which would trigger the payment from this particular fund. I ask these questions in making a determination as to whether it is the best approach to dealing with the disasters.
Okay, the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility is not a fund. It is like insurance. So we are paying insurance annually to insure against the possibility of a disaster. So it's not that we have any funds there to call back on. What we paid in the past was for the year that has gone by. Currently, we have an insurance. We are insured for this year, and we did make provision for next year as well. It is going to be a policy decision in terms of whether we stop utilizing the CCRIF and go with other things, or just work with the contingency fund. But we do recognize that the contingency fund, even at $2 billion, is limited if we have a significant disaster. So we need to ensure that we are able to address.
But FS, I think what Member Campbell is saying is a discussion that we had a year and a half ago. And the fact of the matter is that I think members had a little disquiet about the Caribbean Catastrophe Fund, simply because we have been paying into this fund, if memory serves me correctly, for over a decade. The discussion came about when they had the flooding, I think, in Clarendon. There was in 2017 or some period like that, there was we came under what seemed at the time to be a catastrophe to many, and we were told at that time that it did not meet the threshold for payout. There was a discussion and the committee asked if an analysis could be done and sent to us, because we are concerned that we were constantly paying into this fund, but we're not reaping any of the benefits, even when we had what were presumed to be catastrophe. So we had asked the Ministry of Finance to furnish us with a report just laying out the case for this fund so that we could look at it and advise Parliament. I think what Member Campbell is reminding us is that we have not gotten that report, and I think it is important. Could we get a report just on the fund? We look at, as he pointed out, the amount of time we've been paying into it, why it is that during that time, even though we have had disasters, it has not paid out. So what exactly is that threshold? And quite frankly, for us to make a judgment amongst ourselves as to whether or not this fund is what is the right path for us to take, or to go in a direction that you're going now in setting up our own sort of insurance through a contingency fund or otherwise. So today is not the day for that. I think what we will require is, how long I think it would take. We would like, it is our intention normally early in the sittings, probably in May or so, we will be having a discussion on the budget. Could we request, Member Campbell, that you give us a report laying out the assessment of what is CCRF or whatever it is, so that we can at least have a discussion about, an informed discussion about it.
Yes, Chair, we can provide information on the CCRIF since we have been with it. Just to note again, though, that the government is in the process of pulling together a disaster risk financing policy, which should have various levels of financing that would or is intended to address issues at the lower end.
So it would be like health insurance and major medical, and in other words, you're saying the different levels. But
yes.
I'm agreeing. We're not disagreeing. Our difficulty is that we're not able to make an informed decision because we have not been given all the information. I don't think any of us is either for it or against it. But we were taken aback that when we had what seemed to have been a major disaster, we didn't do the trigger. So we were everybody was in here trying to figure out what that trigger could be. We look at like it would have to be total annihilation trigger.
We were initially insured for tropical cyclones, which would be hurricanes and earthquakes, to the extent that what affected you was not a hurricane.
I remember once there was
you would not get up.
I remember there was a hurricane once and somebody's house flooded out, and at the end when he applied for the insurance, he said, no, you're insured for hurricane, but what happened to you is a hurricane caused flood, but you didn't get the money because you're not insured for flood. So
no,
I think
actually,
I think our thing is really, we just want to be able.
The eye of the storm needs to pass within a certain range of the country for you to have been deemed to have been affected. So it wasn't, but we can
well, as I said, these are the details. We're not, I don't think we are sufficient. Today is not the day for that, and we do have time constraints. So, Member Campbell, I move to Member Clark and Dunn. Am I correct? Yes.
So, Mr. Chairman, the question I wanted to add to the questionnaire that is to go to Ministry of Local Government or JPSCO directly is, who is it that is going to do the audit of the actual work on the ground? Meaning, we pay a flat rate per month to JPSCO for the number of streetlights that they say are installed. But you and I know, because we get the complaint, how many lights are not working within a community per month. How is it that you pay at a flat rate? So yes, 10 lights are up, so you get 10 times $1, $10 per month, but out of that 10 lights, you have 6 working, 4 not working, but yet you still collect the $4 for the street light that are not being worked. Who will do, or who does that audit to make sure that we are getting value for the money that is being paid out?
Yeah, I think that's a critical issue. All right, Member Dunn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I have 2 questions. One, is there an upper limit or target amount that we are actually seeking to aspire to accumulate in this contingency fund? That's number 1. And if so, what it is. Number 2 is that, is there any plans to have a fixed amount dedicated to this fund from the budget each year, or is just on an affordable basis, what you're able to afford, you'll put into this fund?
Okay, so in terms of a limit on the fund, the resolution that Minister will table is seeking to move it to $10 billion. In terms of a fixed amount, we don't have a fixed amount, but we are required to make a provision. So we could make a provision each year until we hit the limit. Mm-hmm.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah. For the 10 billion, sir. The resolution is asking for it to be moved to 10 billion.
So that would be over a period of of time.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right, members, are there any other questions? That could have been the shortest. Who likes the company? All right. FS, what I would ask, and maybe it's that I think we have everything. We're going to try. Maybe you could assist us if we can try and get the report of the committee. It's now 11:30. Members, I think what I would ask us to do, if possible, is if we could meet at, say, 1:45 or 1:50. I don't think what we could do is just ask members to sign. I don't necessarily feel that we have to convene if we're all in agreement. And what I would do is just send out the report 1:45, so that when the House meets at 2 o'clock, it can be tabled, because what has happened in the past is that having signed it, it then has to go and be photocopied, etc. So I'll ask members, or at least a quorum of members, to be here at 1:50, and we will ask for the report to be circulated.
A suggestion that I think can be a little bit more efficient.
Sure.
Since we are convened now, we could just agree that we will sign by round robin. When it is circulated, we will sign it, so we don't have to convene again. But this meeting will authorize.
I was not going to reconvene the meeting. No, that's the point I was making. I'm just saying if members could be around at 2 o'clock, because you have to affix your signature to the document for it to be legal. And we certainly want your signature on it. Well, I'm sure that members will be punctual in their attendance this afternoon. So we'll do that and try and get it off so that when the House, so we'll be early so that when the House meets, we can table it at that time. All right, so members?
Just to remind members that it is important that we are here because it takes more than just a quorum of members to sign. A minimum of 5 must sign.
All
so
right.
we need not three,
like
not three.
Like you might be sitting in a speaker today, or is it Louis? No, Louis. Yes. All right. So members, I'm going to adjourn. There's no other business. Let me again just acknowledge, when I acknowledged earlier, they were not in attendance. As I said, we already acknowledged the University of West Indies Faculty of Law who is here, and of course the Belle Isle High School is here. So welcome. Bel-Air, what did I say? Okay. Yes. All right. So welcome them on the adjournment. So members, thank you. Minister of Finance, thank you for being present. Mr. Sweeney. All right, members, thank you. Meeting is now adjourned.